The state outlines their version of events of what took place on that horrifying evening in Idaho, and we're going to talk about it in today's video.
Hey, 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 welcome to the Sofa Squad, sipping from the cup and hey.
Now hold on everybody, let's do a quick sofa sidebar now. Keep in mind, ain't no cop, ain't no doctor, ain't no lawyer, ain't no therapist, ain't none of that fancy credentialed stuff, okay? Only credentials we got up in here is my sass, and this sofa. Now keep in mind also, I'm just giving my opinions on very public information, so do your own research, come to your own opinions, and drop them off in the comment section. And while you're down there, if you do like what you see here at the Sofa Squad, drop a little like, drop a little comment, drop a little share. It helps the channel out immensely. Now let's get to edition. Hello Sofa Squad and welcome back to the sofa. I'm still sitting on a sofa. I'm still talking about this weird pillow. My name is Paul if you're new to the channel, and if you're not new to the channel, my name is Paul. Okay, so this is like part 2 basically of the Bryan Kohberger, the plea deal, the hearing, all that stuff, right? So the first one we kind of listened to those parts of him, saying the words, he did it. Well, now we're gonna get into listening to the state outline everything. Now he will get emotional, his voice will crack, he will tear up during this, which was very impactful to me. So what we're gonna do is the same thing as we've done before. If you're new to the channel, the way I do these is we watch it basically together. I stop and make commentary along the way about it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get back into it.
Your Honor, the organization of the recitation is different than what I think the court and the public may be familiar with from the probable cause affidavit and other documents. The state's evidence as an overview would show that back in March of 2022, when the defendant was residing at his parents' residence or was residing back in Pennsylvania, his home state, he purchased online a K-bar knife and sheath with an Amazon gift card that he had purchased shortly prior to the purchase of the knife, sheath, and sharpener. Jumping ahead, the end of June of that year, the defendant, Mr. Kohberger, moved from Pennsylvania to Pullman, Washington, which is right across the state line from Moscow, Idaho, for the purpose of pursuing a PhD in criminal justice at Washington State University. The state's evidence would indicate that beginning July 9th of 2022, Mr. Kohberger's phone began connecting to a cell tower that serves the area of the 1122 King Road residence in Moscow, Idaho. Now, I will acknowledge for the court and all present that there are many residences in that area. It's a dense population of mostly college-related occupants. Between July 9th of 2022 and November 7th, the defendant's phone connected to that particular tower during late night, early morning hours, 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., on approximately 23 times.
So 23 times. Now, another thing that I think is interesting in this, by not going to trial, this is one of the disservices of that, right, if you will, is you don't really get a lot of these answers to it. Hopefully the families will, and obviously it would be nice for the public too, but hopefully they can give them this. So number one, when he was like, oh, he bought this knife or whatever, I mean, it literally makes you wonder, and not specifically about this house, these victims, but it's like, was Brian, and I know K-bar is a popular knife, whatever, but I'm sitting here like, was he always thinking of, what, I'm gonna do this one day, I'm gonna see if I can get away with it? And was this in preparation, or was this just oh, I have my K-bar knife, I'll bring it with me? I always like to have one of those, this is what I'll do. Right? Because I've seen so many people talk about in comment sections and speculations and things of this nature of, this can't be the first time he's done this. I don't really have an opinion on that. Honestly, nothing surprises me at this point. If we were to find out that there was some maybe stuff he had done with animals in the past, wouldn't be surprised. If something came out later of oh, he attempted to do this or did this before these victims, wouldn't be surprised, right? So it's the premeditation, and I get that it might not specifically be for these people at this stage in the game with what he's talking about with the order of the K-bar knife, but nonetheless, it's that how long has he fantasized about taking someone's life?
Now, I will acknowledge also, we do not have evidence that the defendant had direct contact with 1122 or with residents of 1122, but we can put his phone in that area on those times.
Now, I also think that the state is very fair in the way that he frames this. Hey, we don't have evidence of blank, but we can do blank, right? I know there's several arguments you can make about this, but I think he's very fair in the statement that he's making.
In the interim, on August 22nd of 2022, Lake Tahoe County Sheriff's Deputy Darren Duke conducted a traffic stop in the early morning hour or late evening hours, about 11 p.m. On the west side of Moscow, on the Moscow-Pullman Road. This was a traffic stop of Mr. Kohberger's car, which turned out to be a 2015 white Hyundai Elantra with Pennsylvania plates. During the course of the traffic stop, Deputy Duke was able to obtain Mr. Kohberger's name, Bryan Kohberger, his phone number, and his address, which at that point was an apartment address in Pullman. We then move to the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. The state's evidence would show that early morning hours on that day, Mr. Kohberger's phone left his Pullman residence, which is an apartment in kind of the central northwest part of Pullman. That phone was then subsequently turned off at approximately 2:54 a.m. and remained off until approximately 4:48 a.m. on Sunday, the 13th of November.
Okay, now a couple of things real quick. This section right here is something that happened in the courtroom where you hear the double speak going on. So when we're doing the live chat, people thought it was my computer. This is the courtroom feed for those that did this, so it'll end in a second. Now another thing too, when you're listening to this, and this again I just think is where you have to weigh your stuff out if you're a defendant like Brian, listening to this evidence, and you have to think, is a jury going to hear this and then some? Where do we think that a jury is going to side? Right? So, hey, we can't say Brian was on his phone, but we can put his phone here. It can connect to the thing 23 times. We can also show this video of a white car circling the house. Boom, 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 boom. You see what I'm saying? All of this stuff you start adding up and you have to ask yourself, is it worth the risk? Who knows?
Sunday, the state's evidence would include a trial, video surveillance of a business on the Moscow-Pullman Highway, just across the state line from Moscow. It would show a vehicle matching the description of the defendant's Hyundai Elantra entering Moscow at approximately 3:02 a.m.
Again, this is what I'm talking about. All the circumstantial stuff. It looks like his vehicle. It matches this vehicle. It's at this time. His phone's connecting here, so on and so forth.
Compiled surveillance that the investigators put together from businesses and residents then show the defendant's car, the white Elantra, as I've described, circling the 1122 King Road area, that neighborhood, starting around 3:30 or so in the morning. Comes into the immediate area of 1122 King Road, which is actually on a dead end, and then leaves several times. And approximately 4:05 that morning, the defense car had entered that area, was leaving, stopped at the intersection of King and Queen Road, did a U-turn, and the state's evidence would show that the defendant's car came back and parked behind and above the 1122 King Road residence.
Now again, this is the part where, remember when the DoorDash person came out, all that information or whatever? Now they don't mention it in here, and I'm curious to know from y'all too, if you've from watching another, whatever y'all have learned as well. Were we ever able to confirm that information? Because that's one of the things where the many things of unanswered questions that we'll have. But for me personally, that was just one of them. So let's keep going.
The state believes that its evidence would then show that the defendant entered the residence of 1122 through the kitchen sliding door on the back side of the residence, which is the side of the residence that would face the area above where the defendant's car was parked. Defendant entered the residence, went to the third floor, and with a knife, killed Madison Mogan and Kaylee Gonzalez.
The idea when I sit here and think of him slipping into the house, breaking in, making his way up, doing this, doing that, having circle, maybe building himself up to it, that kind of a thing. I mean, to me, this is like real life Michael Myers stuff. This is real life boogeyman stuff.
Defendant, as he left that room, for whatever reason, ended up leaving, or the sheath for a K-bar knife was left on the bed next to Madison Mogan's body.
Now, I thought it was interesting how he says, for whatever reason, because again, it's so obvious. So this is what I personally think. I think that he went up there. I think he was tired. I think the adrenaline, I think he was like, oh my gosh, and he just wasn't there. Was whatever took place. I don't think he was planning on multiple people being there. I think he probably had it as mind of a certain thing, right? And so I think he just got sloppy. And this is what I mean by that, by it got messy, right? There's a lot of unexpected stuff. And again, the adrenaline going and whatnot. I just think that this this is what took place. And I cannot remember if it was in this room or the other victim's room where they showed signs where it looks like he sat down on the bed for a minute or something. I can't remember which one that was right now off the top of my head. But again, I can only imagine that what he did, like that level of brutality and whatnot, was exhausting, right? And so, yeah, I'm just like, yeah, probably got lost in the mix or whatever he was doing and didn't think about it. And maybe afterwards was like, oh my God, I left blank, right? Because I think he would have been aware of it. I think after the fact, when he came down, if you will, he would have been like, okay, let's take inventory, let's do this, that type thing.
And I can jump ahead. That sheath was tested by the Idaho State Police Forensic Lab, and single source male DNA was found on the snap of that sheath, as well as blood from both Kaylee and Madison and other trace evidence. But it's important to note, single source male DNA was on the snap of that sheath.
I mean, again, that DNA evidence, if they were coming to me, the defense, and saying, we have this is part of it, we have a single source DNA thing, I don't care, conspiracy, this, that, oh, it could have been this, that. Do you trust that evidence with a jury? What do you think a jury is going to say to that? Your life is on the line. What decision do you make with that information?
The state's evidence would show that Xana Knodel was still awake at this time. In fact, had taken a DoorDash order not long before this started. Her room was not on the third floor. It was on the second floor on the west side. As the defendant was either coming down the stairs or leaving, he encountered Xana, and he ended up killing her, also with a large knife. Ethan Chapin, Xana's boyfriend, was asleep in their bedroom, in her bedroom, and the defendant killed him as well with a large fixed blade knife.
This is my question too. If the door had remained closed, I think he would have kept going, right? I'm not blaming them for anything. It's just, I think that exactly what it was, he encountered them. And it was like this, he was on the high, boom, 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 boom. Someone see me, let's do this. And again, this is where it went off course. This is where it gets messy, even more so. Same thing as like we're watching with the Aaron Patterson trial, where I think that she started off with some kind of a plan, but somewhere along the way, things happened. Things got sloppy, things got messy.
Each victim suffered multiple wounds. I will state for the record that there is no evidence there was any sexual component or sexual assault on any of the victims. I want to make that clear so there's no speculation.
Now, for him doing that, honestly, I was like, wow, because granted, I do not think Bryan's going to have an easy time in prison, but the fact that he is saying that, it makes me wonder if the defense was like, we want you to say this, because that's going to be that much better for him, right? If there was any speculation of that, for the state to say, hey, that none of that went on. Now, I'm not sure exactly how it works, as far as that kind of stuff goes. If it's like, well, look, you did this horrible thing, it doesn't matter if there was a sexual component to it or not. But I mean, definitely when I've learned of this, like, if there was that component, it would be that much worse for him in prison. So I wonder if that's why that was stated.
There were two other roommates in the house, and they were already asleep. During the course of this, one of those roommates awoke, looked out her door not knowing what was going on, and saw the defendant, who was dressed in black with a black balaclava on, holding some sort of container in his hand. And she saw him leave the house through the direction of the kitchen where that sliding door is that I mentioned before.
And again, absolutely, completely creepy, right? And again, very lucky that she's alive, okay? Because remember the whole thing about him coming down and running into the roommate, or like another roommate or whatever, and it was almost like he knew they were there kind of vibe, but didn't do anything. Okay, so a couple of things on that. Well, there's two survivors in the thing, but regardless, what was this container thing that he was carrying, right? Because Bryan strikes me as somebody who went in, almost like I said, with inventory of, I'm taking this in here. Maybe the container was to hold evidence on the way out. Maybe it was to carry something, like who knows, right? But that part's so curious to me.
At approximately 4:20 that morning, so this would have been 15 minutes or so later, Finn's car is seen on a surveillance camera for 1112 King Road, which is immediately next door to the west of 1122, leaving the area at a high rate of speed. And if the court were to see that, or anybody in this courtroom would have seen that, you can see the car almost loses control as it makes the corner, heads north, and then turns to go south on Walinta, which is one of the only ways to get out of that part of town.
All the trappings are there. What would you do if this was your life on the line and you're going in front of a jury and they're going to show that evidence? Here's your car after the crime from a neighbor's ring cam, whatever he said, speeding off so fast you almost lose control. Do you want to go in front of a jury with that information with the death penalty on the table? Yes or no? They're going to see it, right? I mean, personally, like I said, me, I'd be like, oh, 100% let the jury decide because I'm ready to go. I'm done. Take me now, right?
The evidence would show that following that, the defendant in his Elantra drove south of Moscow. We know that he drove on the back roads because there are surveillance cameras on the main highways, Highway 95, that would have picked up the defendant's car if he'd gone that route. And they did not show the defendant's car on that route during the time. So we know that he went through a variety of back roads in very rural, isolated part of Latah County. About 4:48 that morning, the defendant's phone comes back on. And the evidence will show that that phone was located south of Moscow, likely at a side road intersection with Highway 95. From there, the defendant's phone activity tracks it heading back north towards Pullman, Washington, where the defendant lived.
Now, here's the other thing, too, with him talking about phones off, this, that, and the other, taking all these back roads, so on and so forth. Again, it makes you wonder how long, how in-depth, how premeditated, how much planning went into this crime.
About 5:26, starting approximately 5:26, various surveillance cameras in Pullman, Washington, pick up the defendant's vehicle as he enters Pullman from the south and heads north and slightly west towards his apartment, where he arrived at approximately 5:30 in the morning. Later that morning, this Sunday, the 13th of November of 2022, Mr. Kohberger's phone returned to the area of King Road. We don't know exactly what he did, but it returned to that area. It's about 9 o'clock in the morning. He was there for about 10 minutes and then returned to his Pullman residence.
Now, that whole thing of revisiting the crime scene, I mean, come on, right? And again, what do you think a jury is going to think with that information? Like, it's so standard of the perpetrator going back to a crime scene to see what's going on, what's happening, all the trappings. I really feel like he also just wanted to see if he could do it. Can I do this? Can I get away with it?
About 9:30, the state's evidence will show, evidence taken from the defendant's phone, that he took a selfie of himself on his phone in what appears to be the bathroom of his Pullman apartment with a thumbs up.
That right there, so creepy. So here's the thing. Imagine he does that and he comes back and like that photo to me is like, I did it. Yay, mission accomplished. How utterly creepy. And so it's almost like to me, well, I do think that there was a specific target in this particular thing and other people obviously ended up involved in it, victims and whatnot. I just think that he like wanted to do this and then the person came secondary. Almost like I've always wanted to do this and bam, now I have my target. Now I have my mission. Now I have my location. That kind of a thing. And like this, yeah, I mean, again, he's studying it. He's doing all this. It's almost like this real life Dexter. But again, if you look, and I'm not saying like Dexter, I think Dexter, I'm talking about the TV show, the motivations are obviously different, right? But that working in the field, all this kind of stuff and whatnot. Same thing with Brian here. Same thing with Ted Bundy. Look at Ted Bundy where it was like this fascination with that. You know, Ted Bundy could have been, right? Brian probably could have been, I don't know, whatever he was trying to, I don't know what the man was trying to do, right? I don't know if he really could have been or not. But this murderous fascination on their part like takes over. Like that is there because I feel like if you possess that within you, that is going to be your driving factor. Like how do you unwire that, right? Like if you are wanting to actually seek that out, or if you're like a Ted Bundy, and I believe that Brian, my personal opinion was he was on the infancy of a Ted Bundy. Let's do this. Let's see if we can get away with it. We've studied it. We've keyboard warriored it for a while. Probably did some small, weird, creepy stuff. Like, you know, we already heard the co-worker / apartment building mate or whatever, that lady, him doing just creepy, crawly, Charles Manson-y type vibe stuff, right? You know, that was already in place. And I feel like if he got away with this, oh yeah, definitely more. But clearly, thank God, he didn't.
The defendant's phone then went to the Lewis and Clarkston Valley, approximately 30 miles south of Moscow and Pullman. And the defendant is actually seen with his car at various businesses down there. This area is the confluence of the Clearwater River and the Snake River. Lewiston is Idaho's seaport. Large bodies of moving water down there. In addition to tracing the defendant's activities, as I've just outlined, on the 13th and leading up to the 13th, the state's evidence will show that following Sunday, November 13th of 2022, business records show that the defendant began searching for a K-bar knife and a K-bar knife sheath.
Yeah, so remember the whole Amazon searches after the fact, like where it's like trying to replace those allegedly or whatever? Part of what baffles me with this is how sloppy it is, especially from someone who studied the crime. And it almost makes you wonder, you know, was the motivation murder or was it infamy? And murder was the vehicle to get there. Someone who studied and looked at and saw serial killers and made a connection of infamy and their actions and was like, I want that. You know, I want blank. I can't achieve X over here that I want, whatever that is. I'm not saying he had that. I'm just, you know, speculation. So I'm going to go about it in this way instead. Right? Clearly Brian had some issues before and whatnot. I can't remember if this is the correct word or not, but like the dudes who can't get girls and they kind of end up, you know, doing mass events and stuff like that, incel maybe or whatever, almost like that kind of energy of someone who is rejected by a norm, a social norm of something that they might maybe want to be part of. So their answer isn't to try and assimilate or to simply say, that's not my vibe, but maybe this over here is. It's almost a lashing out, right? We heard from the guy, and I can't remember his name right now, maybe the DJ at the pool party. Remember if you watched the documentary where Brian went to that pool party, he got invited to. And essentially the word was he was odd, and it was like somebody trying to fit in, which there's nothing wrong with that. Many of us can relate to that of like going to, you know, in your earlier years, you're trying to fit in, you're going to social events, you're doing this. And some of us might have, like, for lack of a better term, 2 left feet, right? Where you're just kind of awkward. And Brian strikes me as that type person, and it doesn't mean that he couldn't find his clique, but it just means he's going to have a little bit of an extra time. He kind of, you know, marches to his own drum type thing. That to me is what he strikes me as that, but then to end up where he's at and also to go after almost like the quintessential cheerleader blonde type, I think is of note. You know, they said they found all these, you know, pictures of, you know, students, people like that, and victims on the phone and whatnot. So to me, it almost felt like this person who's like watching this life that never was and in their world never would be. It was like a revenge. Like, I'm going to lash out at this concept, this idea, and then I'll get my infamy. Right? Because you would think some of the stuff, just like Aaron Patterson in that Facebook group, it's like, girl, y'all study this. Why are you looking up crime stuff on your phone? You know, Brian tried to cover his tracks in many ways, but he just wasn't quite there.
The evidence also will suggest that there were at least attempts by the defendant to delete or alter his purchase history on Amazon, where all these transactions had occurred. Later that week, the state's evidence will show that Mr. Kohberger went to what we would call DMV, motor vehicle licensing here in Idaho, in Pullman, to change his car registration from Pennsylvania to Washington.
Now that part right there, and again, these couple of things, he tried to erase the history, went and changed this. That's what I'm talking about. Did he leave the car stuff that way because he knew I'm going to be doing this at some point? So let me leave it there so I can then switch it. Like, will we ever even know?
That's of note because Pennsylvania cars do not require a front license plate. The vehicles seen on the surveillance cameras of the defendant's car showed it didn't have a front license plate on it. At the time of the traffic stop by Deputy Duke in August, it was Pennsylvania plate, no front license plate. Mr. Kohberger proceeded to finish his semester of studies at Washington State University and returned to Pennsylvania for the holidays.
So imagine you pull something like this off and then you're still going to school and all that. And so in my mind, what I'm thinking is, I'm like, oh my God, like the guilt and the anxiety from doing that would be absolutely eating away at me. I would plummet on all facets, all levels so fast.
Law enforcement at this point were aware Mr. Kohberger accessing information about him, were trying to find him. They located him in Pennsylvania, and they conducted what's called a trash pull. During the nighttime hours, agents of the FBI, who assisted immensely with this case, working with the sanitation department back in this neighborhood in Pennsylvania, took trash that had been set out on the street for collection, sent the contents of that from the Pennsylvania residence of the defendant's parents to the Idaho State Forensic Laboratory, where the lab experts there were able to identify DNA on a Q-tip as coming from the father of the person whose DNA was found on the knife sheath that was next to Madison Logan's body in the bed.
I mean, this is what I'm talking about. Again, through the lens of, it's your life on the line, and let's say you don't want the death penalty. You want to risk it? This is what they're going to show the jury. What do you think a jury would do with that in conjunction with all the other evidence? Right? And this is where it just kept adding up and adding up and adding up and adding up. And, very similar to the Stephen Stearns trial, where it's, the first, he has two trials coming up. The first one being the, what is called imagery and things that, took place on the, let's say the phone or whatever. Just reduce it down to that for right now. And then obviously the accused murder of Madeleine coming up later in September. So with the first one, it's like, why aren't we taking a plea deal? Maybe one's not on the table. Right? Now this one, Bryan's case, I could see more going to trial. And again, for me, what I think took place is the lawyer fought up to the very second, his lawyer, trying to get this done, trying to get that done, trying to get this taken out, trying to get this suppressed, trying to get this extended, all the things, all the way down to this last docuseries that came out. Because remember, the information was leaked that was going to be an issue. And it also makes me wonder if that being out there like that, information leaked, if it was like this could possibly get the death penalty thrown off of the case, you know what I'm saying, like something, and that was going to be a separate investigation going on. The judge is like, no, we're not going to stop things, whatever, we're going to keep on going, but we'll find out what happened, don't you worry. So to me, with information being leaked like that, I could 100% see later them being like, we're taking the death penalty off. So again, it's almost one of those things with Bryan where it's just like, yeah, you can control the narrative. You're basically going to get this outcome. We've tried everything we can. And I'm thinking from his lawyer, we're at the end of the road. We're jury selection in 2 weeks. This is everything the jury is going to say. It would only make sense at that point to just plea out, right? And two, even if it's on the basic level of, he has to know how infamous this case is and how many people were pining. So it's like, oh, y'all want that? Please, I'll take that away. He seems to be a person of taking away life, taking away opportunities from others. And with the trial, he could do that not only to control the narrative, but to take away like the spectacle of it and make himself still the center of that spectacle.
Subsequently, an arrest warrant was issued here in Idaho, and a search warrant was issued in the state of Pennsylvania with the assistance not only of the FBI, but the Pennsylvania State Police. Mr. Kohberger was arrested at his parents' home to return to Idaho. Upon his return to Idaho, a DNA sample was taken from him, and it matched the DNA found on the knife sheath next to Maddie's body at the crime scene. I can tell the court and the public, the weapon itself, the knife, has not yet been recovered. I can tell the court that the defendant's apartment in Pullman was searched, as well as his office. Spartan would be a kind characterization. There was virtually nothing there. Nothing of evidentiary value was found. And of course, we are now talking 6-8 weeks after the time of the killings.
So very interesting that he's like, yeah, we never found the knife, which I mean, I wouldn't expect them to, right? I mean, not saying they couldn't, but that's one of the things where it's like, if they found the knife in an obvious spot, I would have serious questions, right? Even for this kind of situation. But also the whole thing of like, oh, it's, sparse, whatever he said. Yeah, I mean, he cleaned up the crime scene. Remember, like the car was like all the stuff that he did. That's the odd thing with Bryan, where like he really tried to cover his tracks on many levels, but there was just some really sloppy, messy things that took place along the way.
In Pennsylvania, the defendant's car was seized, and it was actually pretty much disassembled internally. And it also had been cleaned. There was a bucket of cleaner right beside it. I think we can all look to our own cars, in those compartments in the doors. We try to keep them clean where you put stuff. There's always some degree of crud in there. They were spotless. The defendant's car had been meticulously cleaned inside. And the state would present to the jury that was part of the defendant's plan in covering up this. The defendant has studied crime. In fact, he did a detailed paper on crime scene processing when he was working on his pre-doctorate degrees, and he had that knowledge and skill.
So then it makes you wonder if the stuff that he was good at, like cleaning the car, cleaning up the crime system, stuff like that, it's almost like, can I manipulate the crime scene, but then I'm not actually good at the murder part, but then it's like, well, you would hope that you wouldn't be, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, if you're at that point, you're probably doing this a lot. And so it almost goes to show where that level of the crime is, you can't plan for it. You can't plan for other people to be in the house. You can't plan for all the things that would go awry. Yeah, but he knew he can control cleaning the car. He could control getting rid of this. He could control trying to cover his tracks, albeit messy and whatnot. He still could have a little bit more control over a kid walking out, young adult walking out of the room on the third floor, whatever. You see what I'm saying?
So, Your Honor, at the end, the state submits that the evidence that I've given just a quick overview of, and that to present in court would consume weeks, which the state is prepared to do and has been prepared to do, would show that as the defendant has just admitted and pleaded guilty on November 13th, 2022, excuse me, Mr. Kohberger entered the residence of 1122 King Road in Moscow, Idaho. He did that with the intent to kill. We will not represent that he intended to commit all of the murders that he did that night, but we know that that is what resulted, and that he then killed intentionally, willfully, deliberately, with premeditation, and with malice forethought, Manny Mogan, Kaylee Gonzalez, Ethan Chapin, and Santa Cruz. Thank you.
Thank you.
That last part, it gives me goosebumps, my eyes water up, where you can tell he's choking up. So for me, watching this stuff and hearing whoever it is, whether it be the judge, state, whatever, I don't want to say break character because I'm not trying to imply that they're playing something, but let that humanness out of that emotion of crying. It's so touching, and it carries so much weight to it of the horror of this tragedy, right? Because you can tell, it gives me goosebumps, like, this person carried these victims very close to his chest, right? His heart was in this. The pictures they've seen, the stories they've learned, and I know some of the victims' family, they're not happy with it, whatever. Maybe as time goes on, we'll learn more and more about this decision that came down and whatnot. But that part where he gets visibly and audibly upset, it means a lot to me. Now, also where he was saying that whole thing about, we're not going to say, I forget how he said it now, but like, we're not going to say that he intended to kill everybody, but that was the outcome, right? And again, I truly believe that. I don't think he went in there thinking he was going to kill all these people. And I think that was part of his issue. Now, do I think that he would have gotten away with it if he had only done one target? No, right? Because he was so sloppy about it. Taking his car, even though he turned his phone off, it's like, dude, I mean, you're in a very congested area. You don't think people have ring cams? I mean, that's the thing with crime these days. There's so many cameras everywhere. And there's a difference between like a heat of the passion crime, and I'm not trying to talk about like, oh, well, that's fine kind of a thing, but you can wrap your mind around more of like, oh, yeah, you know what? They came home and they found their other person in bed with somebody and they grabbed a gun and shot them. Not saying that's okay or warranted, but you can and they have ring cameras all over the house. Like, it was so obvious. Okay, well, they lost it in that moment, right? Had they ever done something like that before? Did they have a history of violence? This could have been just their 13th reason type thing, right? Versus, I'm going to go kill all these kids in this house. I'm going to bake death cap mushrooms in the beef Wellington. I'm going to fill in the blank, right? For more of these things that have a premeditative energy to them, the second that you even start getting into like, I'm going to try and plan out blank, you should already know you are 10 strikes against you, because most likely somewhere, somehow there's a camera. And if at minimum we're carrying evidence around with us constantly on these things, that whole thing and the Alec Murdaugh trial where it's like, well, he turned his phone on and then turned the phone to the side at this hour. I'm like, what? Alex Cox? He was standing at this exact location in the yard? I mean, come on, right? It's like, it's crazy.
Based on the state's proffer, and importantly, based upon defendants' explicit admission to committing these crimes, the court finds there is a factual basis Therefore, with respect to count 1, burglary, felony, how do you plead, Mr. Kohberger, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 2, murder in the first degree, as it relates to the murder of Madison Mogan, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 3, as it relates to murder in the first degree for the murder of Kaylee Gonsalves, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 4, the first-degree murder of Xana Kernodle, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
As to count 5, the first-degree murder of Ethan Chapin, a human being, how do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Guilty.
I mean, there you go. Guilty, 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 guilty. Again, I'm watching it and I'm just sitting here thinking, like, what would it be like to sit in the audience and hear this person saying, I killed your kid. You know, I killed the life that you brought into the world, that you taught how to ride a bike, that you had to ground because they did something bad when they were 15, you know, whatever. You know, the good, the bad, and the ugly of childhood and all that. Like, what would that be like? I cannot imagine.
The court will find that the defendant understands the nature of the charges and each offense and the possible consequences to him of his guilty plea. The court finds that there is a factual basis for the plea and that finds the defendant believes the plea to be in his best interest. I find that the plea was given freely, voluntarily, and was intelligently made. I accept the plea. I direct that it be entered. I'll continue the matter for sentencing in this case. I think it was mentioned on the call Monday afternoon the defense wishes to waive a pretrial investigation. Is that accurate?
Yes, Your Honor.
The state also?
Yes, Your Honor. The state does not believe pre-sentence investigation is needed given the evidence that is available. We want to, though, make sure that all of the victims have the opportunity to make statements to the court at sentencing.
Absolutely. And certainly both the state and the defense may present whatever sentencing memorandum and other documents you wish me to consider. The victims will be given an opportunity to provide the statements that they wish to at sentencing. Do we need more than one full day for sentencing?
I do not believe so, Your Honor. We have numerous victims, and we have victims who share unique perspectives on this, and we want to make sure that they all have time to express their feelings to the court. But I believe that if we can start perhaps 8:30 or so in the morning, that we should be able to complete it all in one day.
Now that, let me tell you what, now just saying this side note, yes, we will be streaming that. And it depends too, I guess, on the Stephen Stearns trial. We got a lot of overlap. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. That being said, so victim impact statements are going to be heavy and a lot of people are going to have a lot to say. I'm sure some parents will speak out against the prosecution of the case. You know, I'm sure we'll hear people getting very, very emotional, completely understandable. Very curious if Bryan's family will speak, what they will have to say. You know, it reminds me again of the Chris Watts moment with his mother speaking, and you know the nuances that you get into when the parent of the perpetrator speaks, because at the end of the day it's still their kid. You know, it's still their, whether they're grown up, whatever, right? It's still their kid, right? There's going to be a certain level there, and like how they choose to handle that in front of the victim's family is always very psychologically fascinating to me.
Defense agree with that in terms of the time frame?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. So as it happens, we have some time reserved in this case in July and August. The week of July 22nd is available. I don't know if that's too soon for the parties, or the next week, the week of August 4, is available. Any preference?
Your Honor, we're prepared as soon as the court wants to schedule it.
The state, I believe, would be prepared on the 22nd. Right. We've told the victims' families that we're looking at approximately those dates.
All right. So because of the plan to bring in so many jurors to fill out questionnaires, I had ordered that no other trials could take place in this courthouse the week of July 22nd. And so we will use that in terms of the sentencing date, because of what I'm sure will be the significant interest of the media and the public, and the logistics that will be required to make that happen. without trials going, it'll be a lot easier to do that. So let's pick that week. Why don't we pick July 23rd with the idea that if for some reason we don't finish, we could continue into the 24th.
So we have the July 23rd. It's going to be sentencing. We'll see how the 24th. It wouldn't surprise me for it to go 2 days. But also you heard him say like I had basically shut down the courthouse for that week, right? Just the jury selection alone. It was crazy. Okay, so now as I mentioned in the beginning, I want to go over just a few articles that I made note of. These are from the New York Post. Do with that what you will, but they kind of captured some of the things that are taking place with this. And I'm just going to put them on the screen. We'll talk about them a little bit. It says here, U.S. News, father of Bryan Kohberger, victim Kaylee Goncalves, refuses to enter the court for plea as deal splits victims' families in two. This is by Patrick Riley and Jared Downing, published July 2nd, 2025. Let's just go on and see what it says in here. We have Steve, he's surrounded by reporters, and if you just jump down here, it's quoting him by saying, "I'm not going in there," Steve said, as the rest of his family entered the court. And then it goes into, talking about the victims and being friends and roommates. And then moving on to the next thing, it talks about the other family members of Mogan Chapin. It says, meanwhile, they praise the deal, saying it spares the families the worst of a lengthy trial. Now, just jumping back down to the bottom of this next screenshot, you'll see a couple of more quotes by Steve. "You betrayed us. This ain't justice. No justice presided. No jury weighed the truth. Thompson robbed us of our day in court." Now, also jump into this next screenshot, it'll say at the top, Kernodle's father told the New York Times that he does not agree with the plea deal, which he said he expressed to prosecutors. "After nearly 3 years of waiting and being told there would be a trial with evidence presented to convict him, I'm disappointed in the prosecutor's decision," he told the Times in a statement. Now, continuing on, says Kernodle's aunt had said earlier this week that the prosecution told them that it was to spare them from the reliving grisly details of the murders prosecutors would present to the jury at trial to obtain a conviction. "We know the graphics. They were not trying to spare us," Kernodle said. Now, continuing forth here, it just says the Mogan family wants to put this behind us and not have these future dates and future things that we don't want to have to be at and that we shouldn't have to be at that have to do with this terrible person, he said. "We get to just think about the rest of our lives and have to try and figure out how to do it without Maddie and the rest of the kids." Now, the article will continue on with just the contrasting statements from the different family members and their different perspectives. And on this, my heart breaks because I feel like, again, this is why you have so many different families involved in this, not by choice, obviously, right? And everybody handles trauma different. Everybody is different in how they do stuff. I have no idea what it would be like to have a child brutally murdered in this fashion and watch it play out in court year after year, and at the very last minute, the dude be like, "Okay, I'm gonna plead guilty." I personally think that part of Brian, I've said this 100 times in this video, I know, that Brian pleading guilty is this reaction that Steve is giving is for that moment right there. I think that it's for that moment right there. In Brian's world, I think that is power over them, plain and simple, and other things too. I'll be very curious to see how Brian reacts to the family members and victim impact statements in each different one, right? Because you can imagine just looking at this right here, what kind of energy do you think each parent's going to bring? You know what I'm saying? It's going to be vastly different and vastly similar in some situations, I imagine. So I'm curious to see what Brian will do. But I feel like, and again, I don't know, right? I don't know Brian. I don't know any of these people. But I feel like the outrage that is expressed over, not going to court and all that is exactly part of what Brian was hoping for. It's almost like another way to victimize the families, right? And in another sense, for the ones who agree with it and they're like, "Oh, thank God. We didn't want to do this year after year. We didn't want to do all that." Okay, so then what's that? Like, if all the families had acted like that, would Brian be like, behind the scenes, like, "Oh man, I was really hoping to cause him more anguish." I don't know how deep into this Brian is. And this is the whole thing with this, where we never really will know. So that unknowing, the part where the parent said the thing about not knowing the motive, here's my thing. Do I think that Brian was going to ever say that? No. Do I think that we might have been able to see some of the evidence and gotten a little bit more of that? Probably, but not fully, right? I do not think that Brian would ever get up there and say, "This is why I did it," because he can hold it over people's heads. It's another form of control. Now, on that topic, let's talk a little bit about where Brian's going to be going, okay? And let's look at another article by the same place. You'll see here on the screen, it says Bryan Kohberger set to die in one of America's worst prisons with feces smeared cages, riots, and biohazard ventilation system. Alrighty. This is by Anthony Blair, and it was published on July 3rd, 2025. This is another New York Post. Now here we just see a picture on the screen here. We see underneath that thing, the little picture, it says Idaho Maximum Security Institution. And at the very beginning it says, he's going to spend the rest of his life in one of America's worst prisons, a max security hellhole that faces accusations of feces smeared cages, brutally violent guards, rioting inmates, and a biohazard ventilation system. 30-year-old convicted killer of 4 Idaho students will serve his sentence in the state's most brutal prison alongside Chad Daybell. Isn't that interesting? Right. Idaho Max Security Institution, IMSI, where Kohberger is expected to be sentenced to life in prison, opened in '89 and hosts the gem state's most disruptive male residents and violent criminals. Now, one of my curious parts about this would be this, and if you know, let me drop it in the comments. Chad Daybell's there, right? Now, Chad Daybell is death row. Chad Daybell is high profile. So, number one, never really heard any much more about Chad Daybell, right? Very curious about that. In contrary to little Miss Lori Daybell running her mouth and doing every interview she can. Now, with Bryan, someone like him, I'm just speaking in these terms right here. And same could be said for Chad. Bryan doesn't look like somebody who would do well in this situation. He's kind of frail. He's a little bit maybe meek. I don't know how the situation's set up. I would imagine he's going to be in lockdown, and I would imagine he's going there because when you're convicted of these kind of charges like this extremity, whether you are proven to be violent, incarcerated, it's almost like you're going to go here. I feel like what would happen with Bryan is he would sit here and go here and they would monitor him and see his behavior. Do I think that Bryan would be violent? Look at what he did, right? Number one. But he doesn't strike me as someone that might be violent in this scenario, because this is a whole different thing. These people would kill him in a heartbeat, right? Look at the crime that he says that he committed. Okay, and remember, if we're going to the thing too of he was not trying to kill everybody in the house, but rather one person, and there was all this other stuff that happened. Regardless, he's going in there very late at night, sneaking in, whether he knew they were inebriated or not, who knows, whatever. But you see where I'm going, like a very vulnerable person versus men that could be twice Bryan's size, lifting weights all day long, pent up, locked up. You see what I mean? Very different energy. So I would be curious to know what his behavior is behind bars. Am I going to search him out? No. I'd rather just forget about him. Same as Chad Daybell at this point. We haven't heard about him, right? Chad Daybell is convicted of killing kids and women and stuff, and he's still alive in there, so they must have him locked up, away from people. I would imagine they'll do the same for Bryan. Let's keep going. Now for this next screenshot, I just have a picture up here from the article. It says the prison has been named one of the worst in America according to Security Journal Americas. KBO, you just see the inmates here, they meandering around. If this is accurate, of course, depends on what his particular locked up situation would be, but you can see these inmates have access to one another. I'm not sure if that's how it is for Chad. I'm not sure if that's how it's going to be for Bryan. I would be surprised if they're not locked down in some kind of protective custody thing all day long, right? Now moving along, next to the screenshot you'll see up here, it says, since then it's developed a reputation as not just the toughest prison in the state, but one of the harshest in the nation. And it was named 15 worst prisons in America by the Security Journal Americas in 2024. And it says that alongside of infamous institutions, including the Louisiana State Penitentiary, aka the Farm, that one's supposed to be really bad, San Quentin in California, and Attica Correctional Facility in Western New York. The magazine highlighted its alleged harsh treatment of inmates, excessive use of solitary confinement, and lack of mental health resources. Violence between inmates and allegations of excessive force by corrections officers were also brought up, as well as overcrowding leading to a tense and volatile environment, the outlet wrote. Now just finishing up here, we see Bryan here with his very, stare, that thing that he does. And then it says in 2016, the newly appointed director of the Idaho Department of Correction looked to reform the state's use of solitary as punishment. Many of the inmates were locked away in solitary confinement for 23 hours a day, it was reported. This meant little to no human interaction, food in cells, and only showering 3 times a week, a pattern some inmates live under for decades. 97% of these guys are going to get out and walk into an Idaho community community, Kemp told KBOI. If we treat them like crap, if we treat them like animals, they're going to walk out of a prison like that. Now, that was all the clips I wanted to take from here on that note. Now, I've said this before in like the Lori Daybell thing, where I was like, this seems like an inmate that was locked away in solitary a little bit too long with her own thoughts. Hence Lori, you know, coming up with just all this stuff and hyper fixated on little details that she thinks makes her look innocent, but are quite to the contrary. Now, if you take somebody like Chad Daybell or Bryan Kohberger, I mean, my opinion, what they're going to do with them is just like Chad, where they probably lock them away in solitary and forget about them. Do I think that that is mentally unwell for somebody? Sure. Are people that concerned about someone who's been convicted of these crimes and never walking out again? I mean, typically in these kind of situations, people are just like, oh, whatever. They're not a danger on the streets kind of a situation. Now, the last paragraph in this talking about, you know, 97% of these guys are going to get out and walk out into a community. That part gives me pause, because I do feel like, oh, if you lock somebody away, like say they're doing 10, 15 years and you lock them in a room for that long, I mean, slightly dramatic, but not really, then there is a safety concern. It's just like while they're incarcerated for guards and stuff like that, other inmates, and then they get out into a community and they've had whatever kind of damage that does to you, yeah, that's concerning, right? We might need a little bit of rehabilitation along the way, especially if they're going to get back out. But someone like Brian and Chad, I mean, can you imagine what even the guards are going to view them as, right? You hear these stories, like if you watch like prison talk on TikTok, like these dudes who talk about like doing like hard time and like what happens to chomos and people like that, right? I mean, come on, like the guards are like, you know, hey, I'm going to send them over the pillow so everybody knows that they're a chomo. That's why I'm kind of surprised with Chad, right? That you haven't really heard anything about him. So with Brian, it'll be curious to see how that goes over. And again, just look at the picture of him on the screen. He's very frail looking. He's very thin. You know, this is somebody who I'm like, okay, I can see you doing the crime you're saying you did, where you broke into drunk college girls' house and killed them, right? Versus, do I think he's going to talk smack to some muscled up prison dude? I don't think they'll give him the chance. And he better be careful that the guards don't do it like, oh, whoops, we forgot he wasn't supposed to go in the yard with the other inmates. Golly jeepers, right? I mean, that kind of stuff happens too. So that being said, that is it. There's other facets of this obviously coming out and whatnot, but these are the kind of things that grab my attention, and obviously the plea deal, etc., etc. So very curious to see victim impact statements and what takes place. And then from there, where Brian goes. I think Brian is going to be kind of like Chad, where he's not forgotten about, because obviously he has destroyed lives. But as far as the public side goes, I mean, we might hear from him. We might not. You know, again, like if you look at Chad and Lori, Lori's out there doing all these interviews. Chad's just kind of locked away waiting the death penalty. He'll probably be on death row for who knows how long. Brian, I don't see him ever leaving that prison. I mean, he's never coming back out. It's consecutive sentence after consecutive sentence. So that is it for now. I do appreciate it if you're still watching. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below, as we usually do. While you're down there, if you could pretty please drop off some little sofas, maybe some weird little pillows for Roscoe and Spirit, Bo and Luke, myself and you, the Sofa Squad. And until we gather around down there to talk about Brian and Chad and Lori and all those people, I'll see y'all soon.
I just wanted to say thank you again for watching the whole video, and also thank you for being part of the Sofa Squad. Special thanks to all the Patreon members, channel members from both of my channels, everybody who likes, shares, subscribes, comments in the comment sections. It helps the channel out so much. Now, don't forget, I do have that other channel, the podcast channel. That's where we go live, we hang out, we talk. We have kind of sort of a schedule, but just be sure and check it out. I'll put it up here on the screen. And then, like I said in the beginning of the video, if you want to follow me and Roscoe on the Instagram, go on, check it out. It's right here on the screen again. But once again, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being part of the Sofa Squad, and I'll see you in the next video.
Hey, welcome to the Sofa Squad, sipping from the cup that hey, come laugh with the Sofa Squad. Can't roll my damn eyes hard enough.